here in the U.S., for those involved in in-app UA advertising in markets where Apple does have the dominant market share, obviously the news around iOS 14.5 and the app tracking transparency framework has definitely been kind of front page news, as it were, in our industry, in our space. I'm curious, with the UA advertisers that you work with in global markets where iOS is a much lower share, how has the reaction been? Is it caused them to rethink plans, or is it really business as usual?
Great question. So different flavors of the same thing, right? The US is about 55-60% iOS, 40% Android. So obviously every US-based advertiser or advertisers buying into the US are deeply concerned and trying to figure out how they can continue scaling their businesses as they have. And so that is a fair observation that they have been deeply concerned and all hands on deck for the last 6 months or so. On the other hand, consider a market like Indonesia, which has a pretty substantial app user base or smartphone user base, but it's 90% Android, and the worldview of developers, building for that market is definitely a little different. At the highest level, if you talk to the C-levels and executives of these companies, they look at what Apple's doing and they wonder if that is what Google's going to do in a year or two. There has generally been a decent amount of congruence between Apple's strategy and Google's strategy on these types of things. But Google's obviously applied the playbook with a delay, right, of a year or two typically. And so that is maybe the first concern / top of mind viewpoint if you talk to the CEO / exec level in these regions. They're wondering when Google's going to do it, and if so, what, right? Naturally, Google's business model itself relies a lot on advertising compared to Apple. And so they do expect a different outcome compared to what Apple's done. But at the same time, Google does have a substantial consumer business, and likely they're looking out for consumers the same way Apple is as well. And so that is one, and part of the equation. That is a conversation that keeps coming up. People are keeping a close eye on what Google's ecosystem is doing and what Google may do over a period of time. Coming to more tactical matters though, like, next 3 months to 6 months, UA strategy, growth strategy, retargeting strategy, business growth. I mean, it's business as usual. They're not worried about it for the moment. Life goes on. They've taken note of what has happened on Apple. There are a few markets in Southeast Asia, South Asia, all over APAC, to be honest, that have a ton of iOS users. And so that has acted as an experimentation ground or learning ground for advertisers who want to figure out what needs to be done. But at the same time, 90-95% of the budgets were always allocated to Android, and they continue to be. It's completely untouched by the iOS changes. So it's an interesting dynamic where in the long run, they do feel they will have to take this into consideration. But in the short term, it actually makes very little difference to their business.